Good morning. Good morning. It's 10 o'clock. Regardless of what the clock up there says, it's wrong. So it's 10 o'clock. Welcome to this meeting of the Eastern Area Planning Committee, Wednesday, 30th of April, 2025. For the benefit of the public and for those watching at home on the live stream, my name is Councillor David Took. I'm chair of this committee and my vice chair is Councillor Sari House. This meeting is being live streamed. It will be available to view on the council website after the meeting. And by attending to the meeting, you consent to being filmed. Can I remind everyone that when you are speaking, please speak directly into the microphone. You should have a nice little red light on it when you're speaking. The planning committee is not a public meeting, but a meeting to which the public is invited. So all attendees must comply with the ruling of the chair. They must not interrupt the meeting or cause undue disturbance. To support this, please switch off your mobile phones or select silent mode for the duration of the meeting. And those using Teams, please make sure microphones are on mute. The device volume is set to 0 to maintain audio quality. Only those who have registered to speak in accordance with the speaking protocol will be invited to address the meeting for a maximum of 3 minutes. That will be limited to the first 3 people objecting to, the first 3 people supporting the application to have registered, along with a parish council and ward member. No material will be circulated to members of the committee. And when your 3 minutes are almost up, the vice chair will let you know when you have 30 seconds left. We have 3 applications to determine today. And the case officer will be invited to present the report and recommendations. Next, I will invite members of the public who are registered to speak with the Democratic Services Officer before the deadline to address the committee in the following order: public against, public support, applicant or agent, town and parish council, ward members. Each speaker has a maximum of 3 minutes. Following on from the registered public speakers, the planning officers will have the opportunity to address any salient points they wish to clarify, and committee members will be given the opportunity to ask questions of the planning officers before, before moving on to the debate. When we go into councillor questions and debate, for the benefit of the public watching, can members state their name when addressing the meeting? The officers involved in today's meeting include Kim Cowell, who's the Eastern Area Manager of the Development Management, Elizabeth Adams, who is the Eastern Area Team Leader, James Brightman, Senior Planning Officer, Bill Crowther, who is our Legal Representative, in Rochester, who is with Democratic Services, and our Democratic Services Officer, Josh Kennedy, who will keep us straight. We have apologies, Josh, I think.
Thank you. Yes, so we've had apologies today from Councillor Spencer Flower and Andy Skeets.
Okay, thank you. Does any member have a declaration of interest that they wish to make at this point? If not, and if anything occurs during the course of the meeting, please let me know. We'll work out how to handle it. Has everybody seen the minutes of the previous meeting from the 2nd of April? Anybody not seen them? Can we confirm them? All those in favour of confirming the minutes, please show. That looks like it's unanimous. Thank you. Excuse me. Do the public, anybody in the public, wish to make their representation now, or do you wish to wait until the item comes up on the agenda? Okay, I'll take that as everyone waiting to speak. So move on to agenda item 5, which is P Full 2024 06189 Hope Farm, Mill Street, Corfe Mullen. It's going to be presented by James Brightman.
Thank you, Chair. Good morning, members. Today we have an item at Hope Farm, Mill Street, Courtmullen. The application is to retain a stable rural building, site a mobile home for use as temporary rural workers' dwelling, retain 2 small sheds for the ancillary residential storage, and change of use of the land to a mixed agricultural and alpaca trekking enterprise. It is recommended for approval. Town Council has objected on the grounds of impact on the Dorset Heathland sites of special scientific interest, the landscape and character, historic environment, green belt, its location, traffic increase, and the countryside. The application site is in the green belt and countryside outside the urban area of Courtmullen and outside the area of great landscape value. The site is approximately 1.7 kilometres from the nearest protected heathland. Site fronts onto the A31 trunk road and has its southwest boundary adjacent to Blandford Road here. The listed St Hubert's Church is immediately to the west. The aerial photograph shows the buildings at the site are mainly grouped in the northwest, and the access is onto the A31 via this track and a gated entrance which is set well back from the road. This is the agricultural barn, and this is the building to be retained, and the mobile home you can just see there. The site has a number of buildings that have been constructed since 2019, and the barn and rural building immediately to the south, this rural building and the barn here, are lawful. The site has some history of enforcement investigation. The grazing of the alpaca takes place to the east of the buildings, and the alpaca treks access the old railway line, which is here. The rural business involves the breeding and sale of alpaca and operation of alpaca treks, and this is a mixed use. This is an elevation of the mobile home with its cladding. It isn't clad currently. These are 2 small sheds to be used in association with the mobile home. So a mobile home is very small. This is the rural building to be retained. Modest size, 3.1 metre high, footprint 13.8 times 3.6 metres. The area where the buildings are located is bounded by hedging. See the hedging here. This is the barn. This is the access to the site here with the gates, and a wide grass verge separates the site from the A31. There's some signage on the site's frontage here, together with a hanging sign here outside the site. When approaching from Wimborne, from the A31, this is a more distant view, and you can see with the red arrow where the mobile home is, but it will be clad to make it more muted in the landscape. Here is the entrance with the approved barn behind it. Just see the tower of St Hubert's Church behind. Again, this is turning from the A31 into the Blandford Road with the site on the left. Here's the setting of St Hubert's Church and the site. This is the approved barn. The hedging going around here with some trees. In terms of the site's history, the application follows a refusal for a similar proposal, with the difference being this refusal was to convert the stables rural building into a temporary rural workers' dwelling, whereas the current application is to use the mobile home for the dwelling, retain the stables rural building, excuse me, for the alpaca use. At that time, it was considered the use of a permanent building as a temporary dwelling, and the requirement of the alpaca use for additional structures would be inappropriate development in the greenbelt and cause loss of openness. The application was also refused on account of the lack of information regarding trip generation, access, parking and turning in terms of public safety, and absence of information to assess the impact from groundwater flooding on the dwelling. Principle of development. The dwelling and storage sheds have been accepted by the Council's agricultural consultant as being functionally required, and the proposal complies with core strategy policy KS2, which is the settlement hierarchy, the National Planning Policy Framework, paragraph 84, and the principle of development is considered acceptable. Town Council has objected as the site's location is not readily accessible by walking, cycling, and public transport. This is true, but the proposal is compliant with NPPF paragraph 89 and it recognises that local businesses may need sites beyond existing settlements and the use is sensitive to its surroundings with no adverse impact on local roads. Mixed use of the site for alpaca rearing and trekking is a small-scale economic use and rural in character in accordance with NPPF paragraph 88. With the introduction of the grey belts in the NPPF recently, officers consider it is not grey belt land because that site has a strong contribution to green belt purposes A and B. The rural workers mobile home is inappropriate development in the green belt by definition, as it is not included in the exceptions to inappropriate development in the NPPF. This is also true of the two small ancillary storage sheds. The stables rural building is appropriate development in the greenbelt, as it's an appropriate facility in connection with the existing use of the land, preserves the openness of the greenbelt and doesn't conflict with greenbelt purposes. The mixed use of alpaca breeding and trekking may be considered appropriate development under NPPF paragraph 154H5. This is because the trekking is an outdoor recreational use and would have a modest impact on openness through on-site parking. Proposed parking of agricultural vehicles in the barn would limit the impact from customer parking. The use would be contained by the site's hedge boundary with the Blandford Road, so not results in encroachment into the countryside. Mobile home and storage sheds would have a limited impact on openness due to their small size. Town Council consider the proposal would be harmful to the greenbelt, and no very special circumstances have been shown to outweigh this harm. As the proposal does not fail to protect the separate physical identity of individual settlements in the area, given its small area, it's considered to be compliant with Core Strategy Policy KS3, which concerns greenbelt. The very special circumstances are discussed later in this presentation. Impacts on highway safety. The site is accessed from the A31, which is a major trunk road and governed by national highways, and there is space to park vehicles off the highway whilst the entrance gates are opened. So here's the entrance here, and there's a courtyard here where you can park and turn. The on-site parking and turning provision are considered acceptable. The treks operate 2 days per week, on weekends only, and there'll only be 3 treks per day. The Council Highways Officer has not objected. National Highways have advised that there are potential impacts, but these can be managed by planning conditions. And on this basis, no adverse impact on highway safety is envisaged, subject to conditions 4, 5, 6, and 8. Town Council has objected on the grounds of the environmental impact of increased traffic. Officers consider the environmental impact of the proposal as low intensity. And it will only have a very small environmental impact accordingly. And we consider it couldn't be reasonably resisted on the basis of the environmental impact. In terms of the impact on the landscape, Town Council has objected on the proposal's impact on this factor. The site isn't in a protected landscape and it's outside any area of great landscape value. Officers consider the buildings have an appropriate rural appearance and are grouped together, and the site boundaries provide screening when seen from the south, east and west. There is less screening when approaching from the east on the A31, but views are fleeting. The development would not be overly apparent once the mobile home is clad with a dark material as required by Condition 9, and this would then comply with the Core Strategy Policy HE3, which is landscape quality. In terms of flood risk, the site is shown to be at risk from high groundwater in the Council's strategic flood risk assessment, but groundwater monitoring well results which have been submitted since the refusal show the site not to be at high risk from groundwater flooding, and the risk is considered low. In terms of the impact on heritage assets, the nearest heritage asset is the listed St Hubert's Church, Grade 2. And the Town Council has objected on the basis of the site being in the vicinity of this church. Officers consider the proposals would not have an adverse impact on the setting of the church, given the hedge boundaries and that the mobile home to be clad with dark materials, and the Conservation Officer has not objected. Ecology. The Town Council has objected on the grounds of impact on the internationally designated sites of special scientific interest, the landscape and regionally important geological and geomorphological sites. The site is over 400 metres from protected heathland, 1.7 kilometres, and following an appropriate assessment undertaken to determine the proposal's likely impact on this area, it was concluded that no adverse impact would result, and Natural England has concurred with this and raised no objection. There is no evidence that the proposal has an adverse effect on regionally important geological and geomorphological sites. A preliminary roost appraisal for bats was undertaken in 2024, and that found no evidence of bats at the site, but recommended bat boxes and bird nest boxes installed at the site to enhance biodiversity, and this will be required by condition 11. And other than cladding the mobile home, no other physical works are proposed, and the Council's biodiversity checklist indicated no need for an ecological appraisal, and the Dorset biodiversity project appraisal has then been followed. The planning balance. There is functional need for the rural dwelling, and officers consider this to be a very special circumstance that clearly outweighs the harm from the inappropriateness of the dwelling and some loss of openness. The stables and the rural building is appropriate development, and the alpaca trekking use preserve openness with no additional harm over the existing agricultural use. There is no harm to highway safety, landscape quality, heritage assets, or from flooding. And it is recommended that the permission for the dwelling and mixed use as agriculture and alpaca trekking is granted for a temporary period of 3 years from the date of decision to allow the mixed use business to be established, and that permanent permission is granted for the stables and rural building. There's one slight amendment officers suggest to a condition. It's the one about signage. It's signage on the verge of the A31, and officers have just added the section highlighted to prevent no signage or sighting on the all items on the verge once they've been taken away. We must stress that that verge is National Highways' responsibility, and any enforcement action will be down to National Highways to enforce, and not our officers. There's a summary of the impacts or the issues for members to look at while the debate. Thank you very much, members. Chair.
Right. Thank you very much, James. Thank you, James. We have one public speaker on this, who's the applicant or agent, who is Kevin Cooper. Is Kevin here? Kevin, if you would like to come to the little desk in the corner, take a seat and press the right-hand button on the microphone, and I'll turn the red light on. And once you start, you have 3 minutes, and when you've got 30 seconds left, you'll get a warning. All right?
Yep.
Over to you. Thank you.
Good morning. Thank you for letting me speak. We have owned the farm since 2017, not 2019, as the council have stated. What we do at Hope Farm, we have lots of companies attending, adults and children with special needs for animal therapy, Dorset Carers, Diversity, Julian's House, My Time, Young Carers, and many more. We also have students in from Kingston Moorwood, London Veterinary College, Spa Shops to do their animal welfare licence and hours. We also do lots for the local community, Corfmullen Carnival, local fates, schools and old people's homes. We also do Christmas trees for sale, and we donate to local schools and churches, and also take our alpacas to 2 Bournemouth churches on Christmas Eve for their nativity play. We also have a lot of public from all over England coming into the farm to help with tourism. We also send them to the local pubs and shops for refreshments. We also rescue other animals, not just alpacas, like goats, sheep, chickens, which would be destroyed otherwise. We sell our own alpacas mainly to farmers and smallholders for livestock protection, which is a very good business. Planning. The previous application met all the tests required in local and national planning policies, and this is also the case with the latest submission. and that you and the planning officers considered that the proposals are suitable in regards to all planning issues. About the highways, we only open weekends for the alpaca walking on recommendation of the planning department and highways. We have changed our times, allowing half an hour between each walk for the traffic as advised. Finally, I would just like to say myself and my wife have put our hearts and souls into the Hope Farm, making it what it is today for the last 6 years of trading. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Do you have any response or need to respond to any of that?
No, thank you, Chair.
Okay. In which case, we have no other public speakers. This is a shame. Open to the committee for questions or by debate. Anyone got a question? Councillor Gorringe.
Yeah, Councillor Barry Gorringe, St Leonard's St Ives ward. My question is the tracks. You know, where does it actually go when it comes out of the? If we go back to page 20, if we could please. Right, that's a site plan. When we come out onto the A31, where do these tracks go then? If they're going off site?
But the tracks don't go onto the A31 at all. I presume, I don't actually know, but I do presume they go through the site onto the old railway, because the applicant site borders the old railway. Which is.
Could we clarify that, please?
Through you, Chair, I don't actually know where the tracks' physical access is to the trailway, but I presume they don't. They definitely don't go on the A31. They've said it.
Right, answer that?
But is it the only person who could answer is the I'm afraid.
Are we okay to just?
Gentleman, James can speak to James.
Okay. Okay, what we'll do is we'll take a 2-minute adjournment whilst the officer has a chat with the applicant, and then we'll
Thank you.
reconvene. So it's just adjourned for a moment.
No, I know.
Thank you. We'll now reconvene the meeting. Following that, we have clarity, I understand.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, we have. But the applicant has explained to me that he doesn't go on any of the roads. He treks his llamas through this area. So where this area is here, he goes through the tree. Can't see the track, but there's a track through the trees which joins the old railway. So at no point does he go on any of these roads through his own land.
Okay,
Is the metal railway belong to?
Is
I'm
that
happy with that.
okay? Thank you. Councillor Azad.
Thank you, Chairman. Councillor Beryl from Wareham. My question is, why do you need temporary accommodation on site? That would pose that eventually, after 3 years, then you could have permanent residents there on the Greenbelt site, which is not appropriate. So I'm wondering why we are going down that route. And also, I believe the cladding is going to be green, which will fit in with the countryside. but it's only temporary for 3 years, but then it could be made for, permanent. So can we keep it temporary? And I don't see why you have to have someone actually on site, but maybe you can explain that. Thank you.
James.
Through you, Chair. The state, they've issued a statement of why they need the business, why it's functionally required. And part of that is the husbandry of the alpaca. And they have got quite a high degree of dependency on people to be supervised. And all that information was in a confidential report that got sent to our agricultural land consultant, who's the expert. And he has looked at that and agreed with the conclusion that there is a need to be on site. So that functionally on site, that's a key test. And that has been met by the information provided for the business. It has been accepted elsewhere that alpacas are in need of supervision when they're birthing, for instance. And that is a special circumstance. But the main thing is our agricultural consultant is the expert, and he is deeming that to be a functional need. The second part of your question about the temporary nature.
Yeah.
Well, that's up. That'll be considered at different times. So if Mr. Cooper wants to carry on after 3 years and his business is successful, he'll have to demonstrate there's still a functional need, and it has to be there. And then he has to put an application in, and we'll look at it then. But we can't say we'll just grant another temporary one. We'll have to see what happens then.
Can I have a supplementary? Yes, I mean, does that mean that it's actually lived in all the year round, or is it just seasonal?
All the year round it will be.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Coombs.
Thank you. Good morning, Chairman. Councillor Tony Coombs, Verwood Ward. I was just interested in the point about the old railway track. I've just opened up Dorset Explorer, and it appears that the old railway track is owned by Dorset Council. I've also checked there are no rights of way along that track. So my question is, does the applicant have permission from Dorset Council to access the land for business purposes?
Thank you, Tony. James.
I'm afraid I don't know the answer to that either, Chair. And only the applicant would possibly know, unless we can check. I don't know. We can't check this now, I suppose.
My understanding would be that if there is no permission, that would be a civil matter between the council and the alpacas, rather than a planning issue. Can I get confirmation on that? Yeah.
I'm fully aware it's not a material planning consideration, but in the interest of transparency.
Yeah. Interesting, and maybe something to look at later. Do we have any more? Councillor Brenton.
Thank you, Chair. Councillor Brenton, Upton and Litchett Ward. Thanks, Tony. You've just pitched my question. Because I'm also thinking, is this open access land? Is this, how does that work? And yes, there is a trap and there is an entrance, is a bit vague. My other questions were, do we have a time scale for the removal of the signs? Because I have to admit they are one of the most irritating bits as you drive past this place, which is sad, but they pop up. I can understand that they do need to have somebody on site most of the time because alpacas are quite high maintenance. So I can accept that, the reason that they need to have a live-in worker effectively. But I do back the I think the parish town council, sorry, not parish town council, on this business of landscape quality. I can see that it's next to the main road and all that business, but when I do remember this coming through years ago, And I remember at the time, Councillor Bartlett was quite exercised about the change in landscape quality on this site. And he was prophesying, oh, well, there'll be signs everywhere, it'll become cluttered, and it will no longer be open green belt. And it also does, in my mind, detract from the setting of St Hubert's Church, which you used to see as you drove from Wimborne. You used to see this rather nice little church tucked in under the brow. Now you don't see it until the very last minute, which is no good if you're driving, because you're not supposed to suddenly swerve, are you? So it does disturb me that we've allowed continual sort of encroachment of, you know, shutting down of open area. So was there an idea about it doesn't detract from St Hubert's Church purely on what there is now, or on sort of a cumulative factor, and the fact that it has changed considerably in the last 5 years? It's a sort of question of when do we take our judgment from?
Through you, Chair.
Can I just add to that? Condition 6 says that signage should be removed from the verge along the A31, but it doesn't mention anything about the applicant putting signs up inside their own property, which are visible from the outside, which is something we do see from time to time. Is that controllable as well? Thank you.
It is. Well, we need to seek advice on whether we can remove what's called deemed consent under the advert regulations for signage, whether that's reasonable or not. We have to discuss this prior to the meeting, but we haven't got to the bottom of it. There's National Highways will enforce the signs in the verge, but you're right, the signs on the site's boundary would be up to us to look at.
Okay. Can you go back to
But
Alex?
it is separate to the application. So it is a separate issue in effect.
So,
Shall I
Councillor
Councillor Brenton's question? I mean, in terms of the history, there was the barn on the site, which is here. That was granted planning permission.
Yeah.
And they did build it slightly incorrectly, and they had a non-material amendment to change the roof. It was asymmetrical, and they got permission for a symmetrical roof. One agricultural need.
And higher, James.
Yeah, it was high. The roof pitch went up a bit.
So it had planning creep.
Yeah, and they got permission for both those, for the first iteration of design and then the later one. But that was agricultural need for the business. And then that's the first thing. And then the mobile home came on. And I think we haven't enforced it, because then they put the application in, the first application that preceded this, to retain the mobile home. That was refused. And then enforcement wouldn't react until the period of appeal came about, and then they were negotiating with the applicant. So they put another application in. So our enforcement people won't do anything if there's an application on the table. And it's quite a long process, as you know, trying to process applications. So years ticked on. But now we have the first buildings considered acceptable, the barn, in the context of that church, and it's the nearest one. And with the mobile home and the others, they're all very low level. And there's vegetation at the site has grown up over the years. And it's a judgment we've made that it's not even cumulatively, it's not an adverse impact on that setting. And that's something the conservation officer shares too. But that's officer's view.
Thank you, Chair. It feels as though there has been a certain amount of planning creep over this. I mean, largely because of our slow determination of applications and such like. And what I am concerned about is whether there will be further planning creep, as in 3 years, there will be an application for a permanent home. Other barns will go up, and then we'll be asked to have retrospective planning applications for those. Can I ask if there is a way of stopping further planning accretions going on?
The straight answer to that is no, because they have to apply for planning permission, which will be considered like zone merits on every individual application. And if they did build something without permission, then it would be through the enforcement process. So it's very reactionary planning, I'm afraid. But we can't predict what might happen. If it's successful business, yes, maybe they will apply for more, but they have to be justified. So any more rural buildings have to be justified. If they apply for a permanent dwelling, it will have to be of a suitable size. It couldn't be a mansion, for instance, and suitable siting. But again, it's on its own merits at the time. That answer.
So there's no such thing as removing development rights because they're sheds and barns and agricultural rather than a house. Is that?
There is. I mean, with a permanent dwelling, you can then take away permitted development rights to erect outbuildings, extensions, that sort of thing, roof extensions. But this is a mobile home, so it doesn't quite have those rights. Doesn't have those rights. And the temporary permission will ensure that nothing else. There's no other bigger dwelling on the site. And the idea being that they establish their business without putting too much money into it.
Okay, I've got Tony Coombs and then Hannah.
Thank you, Chairman, for allowing me to come back. I understand that this site and the surrounding area is all part of the historic landscape character area, and yet I can find no reference to that in the officer report. I could have an explanation as to why it's either been overlooked or deemed not necessary to include.
Apologies, Chair. So I was conferring my colleague. Apologies, Councillor. Do you mind repeating?
The historic landscape character area washes over the site, the church, and the surrounding area, and it's the whole of the site, including the grazing area. But there is no mention of the historic landscape character area within the report. Why?
I didn't pick it up. I thought it was outside. Okay.
If I could just come in there, I think that's a layer on the Dorset Council, Dorset Explorer, which isn't actually a planning layer. So it's not a planning constraint. Some of the things on here are picked up from historic records, and they don't kind of fall automatically within the planning constraints. So I'm just looking to see. So it's saying here that it just says historic landscape character enclosed Corfmullen, post-medieval. It's not. It's from the Dorset Historical Environmental Records Centre. And I spoke to somebody about these recently because there was one came up on a different application, and they said that it's often very kind of broad brush information to sort of show that we know something, but it isn't a record that often we have information that we can actually use to work with. So it's slightly confusing, and I would like to have more understanding of these layers myself, but it's not something that has been brought to our attention by the Council's conservation team, nor something that I think would affect the planning considerations. Thank you.
Does that satisfy your question as far as possible?
It's an answer, Chairman.
Thank you. Councillor Hobbs-Chow.
Thank you. I've noted that the mobile home is a temporary, but then it says sheds ancillary for residential storage. I don't know that those are temporary, but I might be wrong. And if they are supposedly to form part of the mobile home site, then they too, to my mind, would need to be a temporary fixture or not actually included at all, because if it's a temporary mobile home for limited dwelling, then there shouldn't be an enormous amount of storage required of household goods.
Okay, thank you.
Chair, yes, we they are temporary. Excuse me. And condition 2, the 3-year temporary permission requires them to go after 3 years, in addition to the mobile home. Is that?
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, thank you. That's for the clarity.
Do we have any more questions? Councillor Azard.
Thank you, Chairman. Beryl Azard, Wareham Ward. There is quite a lot of concern and objections from the Town Council, from Corfmullen Town Council, and quite a list actually. I haven't gone through them all. And I would say that does carry some weight, and that's why it's been brought to this committee. They're obviously worried about this setting a precedent for other fields in their parish for this sort of thing to carry on. And the thing is, it may, as the gentleman was saying here, the owner, actually being going on from 2017, it seems like there's been things added, and although they've had planning permission and things like that, it does mean it just sets a precedent, and they may be doing wonderful things in the community, and I applaud them for that. But we do have to keep our mind on the bigger picture, where we're looking at other places in the area that maybe, when they're on the green belt, have temporary accommodation put on them, and they will say, oh well, you let that person have it, over there. And so we have to be very careful how we handle this, and the concerns and objections, they ought to carry some weight from the Town Council, because obviously they have to live with it. Also, I'm worried, like Councillor Brenton saying about it's right next to the grade 2 listed church, and also about flooding. Nobody's mentioned about flooding. How often does that happen? And are the buildings obviously sited in the better end? I don't think you did the contour of the field, so we didn't know exactly what the contour was. Have you got that somewhere in the thing? So where does the flooding actually happen? I'd like to know that. Thank you.
Councillor Azard. You're right. The Town Council did put on, the Parish Council did put in a long list. I was rather disappointed that they're not here, but sometimes people can't make it. But if they've been able to be here and explain some of their issues, that might have been more useful. But James.
Really, Chair. Some of the site does flood, but it's surface water flooding, but all the buildings are outside that area. And the main issue is groundwater flooding. So there's our information, it shows that theoretically there might be a risk of groundwater flooding, but if you do borehole testing or look into existing boreholes to check the levels, and you find the levels down, that's enough to prove there's low risk, because our modelling is very rough and ready, I suppose. It hasn't got to rely on site investigation for the proper picture. So they've done that, and they've proven that there isn't very high groundwater.
Can I have a supplementary? The other thing that's not mentioned is how many animals, how many alpacas. I love alpacas, I must admit. And I've been on trekking with them in the past in other places. It doesn't mention how many alpacas are going to be involved, and it would be nice to know. As far as I've read the papers. I'm sorry, I hadn't read them. I mean, is it going to be up to 50, or is it 200, or if they're going to breed them? I mean, if you're prone to flooding, if you've got all these animals tramping about on the field, and they've only got the one field, that could cause quite a lot of churn up and flooding in its own right. So I think I don't know if that's a planning consideration or something they put in there. I must say that if they're training up other people from Kingston Moorwood and such, that's a good thing. But I mean, the conditions and the numbers must be right. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Azard. James.
Through you, Chair. At the moment, they've got 30 breeding alpaca, according to their statement.
30 breeding. And they will be breeding more, presumably.
Yes, I'm not sure how they keep their stock. If they sell, they bring some and rear them, bring them on. But yeah,
essentially farming.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah, we've got
Thank you.
Hannah.
Thank you, Chair. Very on that point, in terms of we have, I can't see that there's a condition, forgive me if I've missed it, in terms of stocking density. And that is a concern, especially for alpacas who do need something dry to be on. We've got 30 breeding alpacas. Does that include the walking, trekking alpacas? Is that a different scenario? And then we've got all of the other animals that are on site, things like goats, chickens that were mentioned, again, requiring dry sites. And I'm just concerned we've got if we don't put a planning condition in there in terms of stocking density, and we haven't assessed that, we could end up with an animal welfare and planning situation.
Thank you. Councillor Hobbs, Shell, James.
Right, well, the actual use of the site for agriculture is lawful and it doesn't need planning permission. So we as planners wouldn't have any control over stocking density. It'll be up to other legislation, good husbandry practice to sort of legislate that and control that. The actual application is to retain the mobile home and the sheds, the rural building and the mixed use of the trekking. So I don't think we can reasonably impose a condition on stock density.
Is it the case that other regulations in terms of animal welfare would kick in rather than planning considerations? So DEFRA would be involved, I presume, in some of these regulations. If I still call it DEFRA, they keep changing it.
No, definitely.
Yes, I think other bodies, national bodies, government bodies would control the density and the welfare aspect.
Okay, so those aren't planning issues in the same way as building control issues and not planning issues, is that right?
Correct.
Thanks. Councillor Shell, Hobbs Shell.
Can I come back on that just a bit in terms of from a density point of view as well, that would impact on the kind of the openness in the greenbelt space. So from that point of view as well, I know that we have put in restrictions, certainly in equine situations, and it is around the change of use particular point. I appreciate that it is currently agricultural, but when we're changing the use, then we might need to perhaps think about what is available to us legally. But again, I'll take advice and thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Any comments on that, James?
Through you, Chair. Well, in terms of the density of animals, if you had a field that the agriculture use, they could put as many animals as they wanted on there and impact openness. In terms of planning, we wouldn't have any control. But this site's only 30 alpaca to include the trekking. And in terms of the actual trekking, which is the mixed use, the controlled bit, there's only a few alpacas that actually go trekking. And the impact on openness is negligible. And it's an outdoor recreational use, which is appropriate anyway. It's like riding a horse or anything like that. So I don't think we can reasonably resist that on an openness argument.
Councillor Shell. Okay. Does anybody else wish to make comments? I mean, we seem to have moved through questions into debate. Councillor Sally House.
I need to borrow you.
Oh,
Thank you. Councillor Sarah House, Corfe Mullen Ward. So this site does have a long history. And there are just a few observations that I would like to make. We talk about the establishment of the business. The applicant has reminded us that actually they've been there 8 years. I'm not sure what a reasonable time to establish a business is. When I established both of my businesses, if I had not been established by year 8, we would have been bankrupt and closed. I understand exactly what members have said about encroachment onto the green belt, and it's regrettable that the barn is located so closely to the church. And I know that's not what we're considering this time, but what I am mindful of is planning and enforcement's will to actually do the job. So the barn was completed contrary to its lawfulness, and a further application was supplied and was determined. That was a great disappointment when the town council felt that actually compliance with the original application would have been great. So we don't really have a very good track record of holding, and I would say not simply on this site, but other sites to the actual planning permission that is granted. So what I have concerns about is, whilst there is clearly a temporary structure with this mobile home on site, that cladding it makes it look far from temporary. I appreciate that it has a temporary permission, but I would suggest that actually cladding it and making it appear more recessive, you could argue, on the site, actually simply adds to the suggestion of permanence. And if we are to understand the view that was taken with regards to the barn when that was unlawful, how I have no confidence that when this comes back in 3 years' time for a permanent structure, that it'll be viewed any differently. I do support the condition with regards to signage. It's a very ongoing live issue that has happened, not least of all the applicant mentioned at Christmas, where we had up to 20 signs on the north side of the development, very distracting. National Highways have been down on a number of occasions to remove them, only for them to go back up again. So having been in business, I can only imagine that that's a commercial decision that people take, that they can keep replacing signage and don't seem to take heed of the reason they were taken away in the first place. So I'm very content that we strengthen that condition. I would also like, through the chair from this committee, if we can then explore the lawfulness of the use of the railway line. If this is on Dorset Council land, permission would need to be sought, and for a commercial enterprise, then presumably they would need to enter into a contractual obligation, as indeed advertisers who advertise on our roundabouts do, for example. So, but I'm sure the applicant running a commercial business would understand the council's view on that and want that to be compliant and legal. So those are my initial observations, but I'm also mindful that during the presentation there are lots of things that we don't seem to know about this application. They're not included in the report, and as Councillor Tony Coombs said, it's an answer, and I think we've had a few of those today, and I'm not sure. So I wouldn't say I'm determined on this, but I don't know, I'd like more answers. Thank you.
Thank you. I think from my point of view, there are a number of questions that have been answered. I'm not sure if all of them are material planning issues. Planning tends to be quite narrow, so you can get planning permission for a building to do something, but you might not get building control permission to build, or you might not get a license to actually operate it as a business that you intended to. Those aren't necessarily, as I understand it, planning issues. So if this applicant doesn't get permission from Dorset Council to use the railway line, my guess is that would then become a separate matter between the applicant and Dorset Council rather than a planning issue. unless legal or planning can correct that.
If I come through you, Chair, the trekking is a very small part of the proposal that you've got before you. The mobile home and the requirement to have the mobile home on site isn't necessarily entirely linked to the trekking aspect of the building, but it's the husbandry of the animals kept on site. And that's the justification for a presence on site. And I think there's a danger of getting more emphasis on that small element of the operation than there is in looking at it as a whole. The application is to retain those buildings. The officer has explained to you that an independent agricultural expert has looked through the business case and the farming aspects of the proposal and has confirmed that given the nature of the livestock that are kept here, that a mobile home is justified for the purposes of that animal husbandry aspect. The use of the railway land is entirely separate, and I don't think that this application should necessarily be considered on that point alone. It is something we can take away. If that part of the business enterprise was to stop because they couldn't use the railway line, then the animal husbandry and the other aspects would still be there in effect, and also the mobile home would still be required in order to look after those animals. We can take that away, but out of the 30, only a very small proportion of them are used for the trekking, and I think it's quite easy to get led into that issue as being greater than it is. Obviously, it's important. I'm not underestimating the importance of it, but it is. I'd like to come back as well on the Dorset Record Centre. They record all sorts of things and instances of things that we have in the landscape. We've had them recently on other, but they are not a material planning consideration. They do not form part. And whilst it might not have answered the question, it is what it is. Dorset Records log what they have. They put them out there in the public domain, but they are not a material planning consideration for this purpose of this application. Thank you. I hope that helps.
Thank you. Tony, I think, had a hand up earlier. But again, no. In that case, Hannah.
Thank you for letting me come back again, Chair. So in terms of that, I appreciate that the trekking is a small part of what you said, but we are actually determining that it's not a separate bit. We're determining the whole thing, so we have to take it as a whole, of which the trekking is part, as I understand it. So that's appreciating that the husbandry is needed for the breeding. We are taking this as a whole application. And what we don't know is with this trekking against the railway issue is that whether a decision around that would change our other consultants' decisions in terms of whether National Highways would therefore want to provide an additional comment on it because of the route change or the possibility of the route change. That is something that we don't know, and that makes me feel uncomfortable.
Okay. We've got Alex as well, but I just wanted to. I'm still struggling with this idea that the alpaca routes is related to this planning permission. If they get permission to do trekking, then presumably they can revise routes as and when they see fit. Now or later, is that fair? I mean, we're not restricting them to a particular route, is that correct?
Yeah.
So whichever route whatever the routes are, they can flex in the future. So I'm not sure we can fix on that. Well, Alex Pennington.
Thank you, Chair. Yours is still on. I understand. I mean, I always think trekking sounds a little bit exciting as though you're going up the Andes, whereas actually you're going for a gentle stroll along the route of the old railway. It's not exactly, I assume, they're not doing 20 or 30 miles, not if they've got to get back again in time allowed. So up to a point, I can accept that. That's fine. Can I bring you back, though, to a question on if we grant permission, which is the recommendation, what's recommendation 3 or condition 3 rather, the occupation of the mobile home is approved to somebody who shall be limited to a person who is solely or mainly employed or last employed prior to retirement in the rural business of agriculture. Yes. But it also can be somebody who has retired. I mean, you know, we could have a situation where a worker works for a year, then retires. Or worst case scenario, their widow could stay there. So this, I'm sorry, but this may be a standard agricultural tenancy sort of condition. But it seems to me that if it's tied to the welfare of the stock on site, there should be, it will always be occupied by somebody who is involved with the work on site. It should be extended to widows or retired people or whatever, because I can imagine, though I have a lurid imagination, that in a couple of years' time, the business might go bust, somebody might retire, and because they were employed in agriculture on this site, then they're allowed to stay there forever. I know it's 3 years, but what stops them then going to the, well, actually, we either need another mobile home because we've got a retired person and we've got a present worker, or the site is sort of relatively out of agriculture by that time, but they still have a right to stay there and a right to put in a permanent dwelling after the 3 years. I just wondered, I could do with some clarification on that. And could we actually change that condition to stop after employed?
Thank you. Right. Understanding is that those words are from agricultural tenancy regulations. This is a 3-year temporary permission. And if my guess, if that was the case, after 2 years, then
Another one.
they get 1 more year and they don't get an extension. Unless they apply for one and we granted it. Which we might not. And if there was no need for it, I'm sure we wouldn't. He said confidently.
Okay, so Duncan Surrey House, Corfe Mullen. So the more I've thought about this and listened to members' contributions, a key part of this application is the cladding of the temporary accommodation. And I understand why aesthetically that may be better, but I really struggle with something that is temporary accommodation being made to look anything other than temporary. And so I have to say, on that basis at the moment, I have made my mind up. I won't be able to support this application. I think if something is temporary on the site, it needs to look temporary. I think that clearly sends a signal to the wider community that that is what this is. It's a temporary stopgap, and I think it sends the wrong signal to other landowners, and I think also it will keep it in the mind of this applicant that actually the permission is temporary. So should they wish to come back with a separate application if this fails, then I could consider supporting it, but not as it stands at the moment.
Thank you, Councillor Sarah. Nice. Councillor Hazard.
In the light of uncertainty, and there's lots of questions unanswered, as I consider, that have not been resolved, then I would like this deferred perhaps to the next meeting, and then we can resolve all these other anomalies that we've got and all these concerns, because there seem to be a lot of difference in the conditions and things like that. So I I would like it deferred, because certainly with the open access, I would have thought that should have been already resolved. That should have been a question that perhaps the planners had mentioned to them or something like that. The other question that was asked early on that had to be asked of the applicant, I think all those things make us feel very uncertain that this is not being fully explored in the right way by the planners, and therefore I'm afraid, unless it gets deferred, as I'm saying, then I will not be able to vote for this. Thank you.
Okay. Councillor Morgan.
Yeah, Councillor Morgan, representing Wimborne. At first, this application seemed to be fairly straightforward, but as we dig into it, then of course other things arise, as my fellow councillor Beryl has said. Certain things come out which we obviously can't answer. At first, I thought, yes, this could be an application that we could approve following the conditions which have been laid down. But the more one digs into it, the more complicated it seems to get. So I think if Councillor Izzard is recommending that we defer this until we sort out, then I would be quite willing to second that deferment until some of these anomalies, shall we say, are cleared up. I mean, I can appreciate why it's come and what is needed with the temporary workers hut. I think that could be the main issue at the point at the moment. And I think unless we sort that out, it's going to be very difficult to either refuse or give permission. I appreciate that if we did turn it down, then obviously that's going to affect in some way the business itself. So I think it would be better to have a deferment so we can sort these things out and then discuss it again. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. That's my thoughts.
Thank you, Councillor Morgan. A couple of points concern me. The first is we would need to identify which particular questions we feel have not been answered fully. And so if we defer waiting for information on, we'll need to identify waiting for information on what. The second thing that concerns me is, are these concerns, these questions, material planning considerations? So it might be a little embarrassing if we go to appeal and none of the issues that are being raised are actually material planning considerations, just get dismissed and costs awarded against us for being unreasonable. So I'm a little worried about that, but I'd like to know what questions need answering. Councillor Coombs.
Thank you, Chairman. Seeing as I was the one that raised the trail, picking up on what Councillor Hobbs-Sheller was saying also, I think we need the clarity about the use of the trail and whether that has a material impact on the planning application. It's not so much per se the use of the track, it's whether or not the inclusion of that, if permission is not granted, then becomes a material planning consideration. So I think we need time just to have that bottomed out so that we are totally clear that there are no issues with material planning considerations that have not been dealt with.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Coombs. Anybody else? Councillor Brenton.
Thank you. I really would like, if it's a 3-year licence effectively, that the condition is only to be used by workers on the site, not widows, not retired, because if you've got a retired person in there who isn't working with the alpacas, then we're going to need another temporary building for the one. So I'd just like that defined a bit more clearly. If it was a permanent residence, that's different, but this is 3 years.
Thank you, Councillor Brenton. Would this question from me to legal or planning, I don't mind who, would this become an agricultural tenancy and subject to agricultural tenancy regulations? Is that what this retirement is about? Either one of you.
I think Phil's going
Just copy and paste.
Through you, Chair, I think I'm going to have to simply say I don't know. My agricultural law is pretty non-existent, so it'd be unfair to advise you on that. I think Councillor Brenton's concern is allowing a temporary dwelling to remain on site for a significant period of the 3 years if they resign tomorrow. I think that's putting it in a nutshell. I think if members have that concern, it could be an amendment that was considered if you were prepared to grant permission subject to that condition being amended. I don't think that would be unreasonable on a temporary consent, but I know there's other potential proposals being aired as well. Thank you, Chair.
Thanks. My concern was if the council removed that or removed the ability for a retired person or their bereaved spouse to occupy it. If it was an agricultural tenancy, then there are laws and regulations around that sort of thing that we might then be in breach of. I was a little concerned about that. Councillor Coombs.
I think we need the clarity. So again, that needs to be another reason for deferral. I'm not saying whether the application should be granted or refused, but I think there's too many question marks. Let's get the answers and then we can deal with it in the knowledge. We've got the full knowledge.
Okay, we've got a proposal. And I've forgotten who made it now, to defer.
Councillor Ezard.
Was that Councillor Ezard? And it was seconded by David Morgan. To defer. So since we have a proposal and a seconder.
I think. Do you mind if I?
No.
Thank you, through Chair. At the risk of being overly technical, my recollection is that Councillor Ezard said that she didn't think it could go ahead without a deferral, and she was minded it should be deferred. I didn't hear that as a formal proposal, and if it was, it would need to be Councillor Ezard that gave the reasons why she thinks it should be deferred, and for Councillor Morgan to agree that those were acceptable as seconder. That might be, having heard what's been said in debate, Councillor Ezard just adopts the reasons that other members have set out, but she does need to put those forward as part of her proposal. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Ezard, over to you.
Well, I think the a couple of the reasons that I would be concerned about and is not sure in my mind is one, that the town council has put so many objections in and we're not actually taking those into consideration enough, which it should be. I know the two local members which are present here today had no opinion at all about them in the papers. The other concern I have is about the cladding, which could be on a condition, but also over the years, this has crept from being a field, just a green field site, into actually being built on. And the applicant, by his own admission, had said that there'd been buildings on it 2 years before the planning officer mentioned that. So, and also they had some permissive rights on there with buildings, but also we're not taking into account, I don't think, about the listed to church enough, because I think aesthetically it is spoiling the area. And I think that might be something we can put in. that is actually should carry more clout. And that area there is very, actually, I also travel along the A31, and although they said you can hardly see the buildings, you can see them clearly. In the winter, you can see them clearly, and actually it does detract from the church. And I think that might be one of the reasons, and also the fact that even asking for a temporary accommodation on there, it sets a precedent for other areas to do this. And I'm not sure if that's a planning committee consideration or not, but I think that is something that really is not something we should accept and should be granted. I'm not sure if those things are considerable enough to take forward. And the fact that obviously Dorset Council and the alpaca walks covers an area that is not a right of way, that we don't know if it's open access, we don't know if they've asked permission for that. And I know it's not perhaps a planning thing, but I thought, because I'd put in for a right of way many years ago, and all of this now comes under planning as far as I know, rights of way. So I thought that would be something that would be looked at and asked from the planning point of view. So that is something that needs clearing up, and we need clarity. Thank you.
Okay, so Phil.
Thank you, Chair. At the risk of stealing us thunder, listening to Councillor Azard, it sounds like there are a number of points which would be erring towards a recommendation for refusal rather than deferral. My view is that the report, James's report and presentation, sets out officers' views on most of, putting it at its lowest, if not all of the issues raised by the parish council, and that those have been dealt with. As far as I'm aware, there are not any issues raised by the parish council that haven't been addressed in the report presentation. If you disagree with that, then of course you can identify those and say what you need further clarity on. But if it sounds like you're expressing disagreement with the officer's assessment of those issues, which is perfectly reasonable and proper exercise of your discretion as the decision makers. But if that's what you're doing, you need to explain what issues that you disagree with the officers on and set those out as a proposal for refusal if you think that's appropriate. The deferral would be because there's further information that you need in order for you to make your decision, not simply because you disagree with the officer's assessment on matters of planning judgment. Those matters in this forum are for you to make and for you to reach a conclusion on, even if that's contrary to the officer's recommendation. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Phil. And indeed, that was going to be the gist of my comment, which is, are you proposing a deferral? And if so, what questions do we need answering? Are you proposing refusal? And if so, what are the grounds for refusal?
Yeah,
so either one of those.
As the legal person has mentioned, perhaps it's not a referral. If everybody's content that they've had all the information they require, at the top of my head, I can't think of the actual words to put about referring it, because I don't want to decide one way or the other at the moment, because I think there's been sort of things are clouding the issue. But it's only really to get clarity about, these various things about the access, about, the cladding, which should say it's a condition. But also, there is one or two other things that would be really nice to get clear. Yeah, the town council, it's a shame they're not here today to actually state their case, but the green belt's the green belt, and I don't like things creeping on the green belt when we could do something to ask for questions about, in the past, if they knew they were going to have this sort of business, why are they now introducing 5-7 years down the line a residence when in the past they haven't had it? So that crept into my mind, but I mean, that's probably allowable, but it's not something we can actually refer. But certainly I'm a bit uncertain about being able to decide, you know, to grant this rather than refuse it. So you know, if it was more clear, perhaps in another month, then that may be something that I could grant. That's all I want to say really at this point. Thank you. I can't really put in words any of the concrete things that maybe you want.
Excuse me, am I allowed to speak? I can answer all of these questions that you're asking.
Sadly, you're not.
You're going to make it go back to my planning now, cost more money and more time when I can answer every question that you've answered, you've asked. So surely it'd be best for me to sit there and ask me the questions and I can answer them.
I appreciate what you're saying, but the way the committee functions, if you sit down, please. The way that we need to move forward is to either get a proposal to defer or to reject or to approve or nothing. At the moment we don't have a great deal. Councillor Coombs, are you going to cut through this?
I'll have a go because it's getting quite painful. I move to defer this application to the next meeting on the grounds that we need clarification on agricultural tenure, the full detail which Alex mentioned earlier, and also any impact about access onto the trailway that would have, whether that has a material implication on the planning application before us.
So access to the trailway over Dorset Council land.
Yeah, and whether that has a material planning implication on the officer report on this.
Okay.
Those are my two reasons for deferral. I look for a seconder.
Okay, I've got three reasons, and those down which are basically access, cladding, and the agricultural tenure. No, it was mentioned before.
But the proposal hasn't mentioned.
Chairman,
She'd be happy to accommodate the cladding. Yeah, she would. And then on that basis, I'm content to second that.
So we have a proposal to defer based on questions around cladding.
Chairman, I think I need to detract from my deferral to be able to let Tony do one. No, he's shaking his head, so that's fair enough. Carry on. Tony's taking it over. Fair enough.
Yeah. So what we need to know, and these are coming from the floor in terms of proposals. So, but what exactly is it about the cladding that you want to establish? Whether it should or shouldn't exist?
Yes.
What are the issues with the route proposed for the trekking, and what material planning difference would it make if they were refused permission to use Dorset Council land? And the agricultural tenancy terms was the other one that was mentioned. Are you raising all those as reasons for deferral?
Yeah, picking up on the cladding, it's about the precedents for conversion to a permanent dwelling and the image that gives. So further clarification on that would be the third reason.
Okay. And do we have so that's your proposal. Do we have enough information in that proposal? Do we have a seconder for that?
Yes, you do.
So Councillor Sowry House has seconded it. In which case, first thing we can do is just take a vote on that proposal, see where we go. So all those in favour of deferral, please raise. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, unanimous. So needs to be deferred, subject to getting questions answered.
Thank you, Tony.
Thank you. If we move on, sorry, just the formal bit. Default 2024-06189 Oak Farm, Mill Street, Corfmullen will be deferred until the next meeting. Whilst we establish answers to various questions. Moving on to agenda item 6. We've got P4 2024-05059 50 Churchill Close, Sturminster Marshall. This will be presented by Liz Adams. And we do have a few public speakers on this one later on. But are you ready, Liz, or on a deferral?
Thank you, Chair. So the second proposal before you this morning is for the erection of 2 bungalows on a backland plot formed from the demolition of a garage and outbuilding to the rear of 50 and 51 Churchill Close. This is in Sturminster Marshall, and objections have been raised by the parish council. The application site lies within the settlement, identified by policy KS2 as a rural service centre, where residential development will be allowed of a scale that reinforces the role as a provider of community leisure and retail facilities to support the village and adjacent communities. That's a bit of a mouthful. The 50 and 51 Churchill Close are 2-storey dwellings that are joined by their garages. You can just about see them in the distance there. They form part of an established line of properties comprising short terraces attached with single-storey garages that encircle the recreation area. The neighbourhood plan recognises the distinctive character of this area, and policy SMNP9 expects development to follow the key design principles, which in this area relate to the building line and the height of the properties. It's worth mentioning that a previous refusal of permission for 4 2-storey properties behind number 20 and its neighbours to the southeast of Churchill Close was overturned at appeal in 2021. The inspector determined that although the plots created would be smaller than some in the area, they would provide adequate sized gardens and parking provisions, so would not be cramped. The inspector noticed some variety in this part of the village and considered that the alternative design and layout would be appropriate and suitably attractive. And 5 dwellings have since been achieved as backland development to the rear here. You can just about see them in that street scene. Now, it's recognised that this decision was made prior to the adoption of the Sturminster Marshall Neighbourhood Plan, but officers have not identified any policies within that document that we consider would have materially changed the outcome of the appeal. This constraint kind of shows the purple is the settlement and the pink, or it turns brown when it's washed over by the purple, are the areas of designated open space. On the aerial photograph, you can see that just to the north of Churchill Close and north of the 2-storey row of terraced houses here, there is actually a cluster of bungalows. So bungalows aren't unheard of in this area, though they are screened by a large tree. The proposed garage and outbuilding that will be removed are shown in the purple dotted lines here, so that's the outbuilding and his garage. The new access will run between 50 and 51. And there's a small bin collection point here so that bins can be placed near to but not on the curb for collection. The proposal is for 2 2-bedroom bungalows, and these will be glimpsed through the new access gap in a similar manner to the proposal that was lost up here. The neighbourhood plan includes a requirement that development should respect the unique character of the Plan 1950s estate, including its characteristic building line, height, rhythm and materials, and the use of communal green space. This proposal for single-storey development set back in the plots can be achieved without harm to that character, in accordance with policy SMNP10. the scale and form does not depart from the variety found in the area, as previously explained, and that's a requirement of policy SNNP 11. The design of the units is sort of traditional, fully hipped roofs, bay window and porch detailing. Brick and clay effect tiles are proposed, with details to be secured by condition. The proposal takes a fabric first approach to sustainability. There is apparently the potential to install air source heat pumps, but this isn't included as part of the application, so would need to comply with permitted development legislation if the development is built. The two units are almost identical, so this is number 2. The proposal will require the removal of a short piece of the wall to the front of the property, which you can just see here hiding behind the car. Walls have already been removed elsewhere in the street, such as at number 52, 43, 54, in order to provide off-street parking. So no demonstrable harm to the street character is anticipated from the proposal in that respect. It's worth noting that the owner of the site has also submitted an application for an additional 2-storey dwelling at 51 Churchill Close. This is pending determination. Officers do have concerns that if this application was built out in addition to the current application that you are now considering, then there may be issues of overlooking and limited amenity space, but that is considered to be a matter of that is material to the application for number 51 rather than the current application that is before you today. But I'm just providing that for so you're fully acquainted with what's going on. This slide shows the proposed site plan superimposed on an extract from Dorset Explorer, so that you can hopefully see the relationship with the neighbours. Concerns have been raised about impact on neighbouring amenity. As the properties are single-storey and have fully hipped roofs, apart from the small gable at the front, it's not anticipated that harm would arise in terms of loss of light or an overbearing impact. Appropriate separation distances are achieved with the first floor windows on the rear of the properties with Churchill Close. You can see there a 19-metre separation. Increased residential density may be associated with increased noise, which has been raised by neighbours, but gardens backing onto each other is not uncharacteristic within the settlement. Fencing will provide screening, and vehicle movements for 2 properties is not identified to result in demonstrable harm to amenity. These are photos looking down the garden of number 51 to Cwtch. Sorry, I got that wrong. Cwtch. Thank you. Thank you. As explained in the officer report, the potential overlooking from the first floor bedroom window of that property has been a consideration and was raised as concern. But it's officer's opinion that the oblique nature of that overlooking would not conflict with the provision of appropriate amenity for future occupiers of the bungalows. Each new dwelling will be served by a cycle store and 2 off-street spaces. It's recognised the new off-street parking for number 50 will result in some loss of on-street space, but no danger to highway users has been identified as appropriate visibility space available. And again, it all comes down to the significance of the number of trips. And in this case, it's not considered that the trip rate would justify concerns in relation to highway safety. In relation to flood risk, concerns were raised by the Parish Council, and you can see from this the latest mapping, which is provided by the Environment Agency, that the properties to the rear do lie within flood zones 2 and 3. So we have to consider the application site itself, and there's no identified risk either from fluvial or from surface water flooding. Site-specific borehole testing has established that groundwater levels don't represent a flooding threat. And a condition can secure compliance with the proposed drainage strategy, which incorporates a soakaway chamber and permeable paving, which the council's flood risk management team consider to be appropriate and satisfactory in this location. So in summary, officers consider that the application complies with planning policies and there's no material considerations that would justify refusal. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Adams. We have some public speakers. First public speaker is Steve Eaton. So, Mr. Eaton, if you take a seat, press the right hand button on the microphone. When the red light comes on, you have 3 minutes from when you start speaking.
Okay, thank you for allowing me to come and talk. My name is Steve Eaton. I live in the Rookery, and I am here to raise a firm objection to the planning of the bungalows in the to the rear of our house, because of the impacts that we feel this will have on us personally as a family, but more importantly as a community, as will be alluded to by the county, by the parish council representative that will talk shortly. I find the words in the planning, I think it actually talks about the buildings in particular without taking into account the community and the impact of the surrounding area. Certainly for us, there will be a financial penalty, almost certainly. There will be noise pollution, and there will be an impact on our privacy, no question, as those properties do back onto. And those photographs that were shown up there, I think, are really misleading, making you feel that there is far more distance than there actually is. We currently look at the back of our house into beautiful gardens. We live in the countryside. We choose to live in a rural area, not an urban area. And we are surrounded by bushes, trees, colour, animals, and it's gorgeous. We love living where we live. If this goes ahead, we will look out over 2 bungalows with about approximately 20 metres of roofing straight in front of us. That will impact us visually, even though apparently aesthetically that's acceptable within the village. From a community perspective, in taking into account number 51, the development on there, you are looking or proposing putting 5 houses, 5 developments onto plots where currently 2 exist. There is an impact on the future from an environmental perspective, where you talk about drainage. That is drainage in relation to the building. It does not take into account the runoff caused by paving over driveways and paving over and building over gardens where children currently play, which act as huge soakaways. We live in a village where flooding is of a significance, real significance. You cannot access the village in many parts of the winter because of excess flood water. Okay, that is not due to drainage, that's due to surface water. Overdevelopment is also a huge impact for us here, and by giving permission for these buildings, we believe you're setting a dangerous precedence in everybody being allowed to building their own gardens in order to reach quotas. Can I continue? I've got 30 seconds left, please. Please, 30 seconds.
Yeah, that will be 3.5 minutes.
Very, very quickly, try and do it in 10.
From an ecological perspective as well, when we look at the building, we have birds, bees, etc., etc. You talked about bat populations and accounting for bats. My garden is full of slow worms, if nothing else. Slow worms are protected. There is no question there are slow worms that building is going to be covering slow worms. Slow worms are protected in the wildlife policy of 1981.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
We have one more a few more public speakers, but one more as an objector, who is Tim Weaver.
Me, yeah.
So again, Mr. Weaver, if you take a seat, the microphone's already on. So when you
thank you.
Get yourself comfortable, and when you start speaking, for 3 minutes, Councillor Sykehouse will let you know when your time is nearly gone.
Okay. I want to state that my wife and I object to the building of the bungalows in 50 and 51 Churchill Close. And I'd like to start by echoing comments that are documented by another planning case officer, Emma MacDonald, during a site visit to number 51. And she said, and it's written down here, Officers would be particularly concerned about overlooking and overshadowing of the Cutch, our house, which lies very close to the rear boundary of 51 Churchill Close. For the development of a new dwelling to the rear of 51 Churchill Close, required separation distances are unlikely to be achieved. She also carried on by saying groundwater flooding will also be a significant constraint to development of new residential dwelling in the rear garden. A flood risk assessment, including a sequential text, is likely to be required. Now, I know you've done a flood risk assessment. I've no idea what a sequential text is, but okay. We'd also like to ask the question whether the measurements stated on the plans as it appears, the site length are measured from the first floor window of number 51, not from the end of the substantial ground floor extension. This really needs to be clarified. Going back to the flood risk, concreting over of a large area of land where no gravel is used might not cause issues, as stated in the risk assessment, to the dwellings, but we can't see where the impact to Newton Road, which is lower than the proposed development, has been considered. This road has flooded and been almost impassable frequently over the past 2 years due to groundwater and runoff. Flooding is a major problem in the village, causing us to be almost cut off at times during the winter months. With climate change, this will only get worse. We're concerned also about the noise impact due to the close proximity of our boundary to the properties. At present, we hear children playing in the garden and nature. We've got a bird box on the boundary fence, but in future it'll be cars with the parking and household noise. The impact of the new builds on the view from Churchill Close has been taken into account. It mentions that it's obviously screened because of the access, but not from Newton Road and not from our house. Instead of greenery and trees, we will have a large expanse of concrete tiles in our line of sight, which is contrary to clause 1311 in the report, where it says that there's no harmful impact on outlook, loss of light, yeah, but it's a harmful outlook. Choosing to live in a village, in my wife's case, for nearly 30 years, okay, open space and nature is what is expected. Plans such as these will increasingly overcrowd and urbanize the village. Okay, I'm wrapping up. Allowing building in gardens is setting an unwelcome precedent. We ask because the views of 2 planning officers are so opposed that a third opinion is sought. Nikki Clayton is going against Parish Council views, village plan and policy. Okay.
Thank you very much.
No problem. Thank you.
We have the applicant or agent, Chris Mill.
I'll leave the microphone on for you.
Good morning, members. My name is Chris Mill and I'm an Associate Director at Pure Town Planning, and I'm speaking in support of the proposal on behalf of the applicant. I'm an RTPI Chartered Town Planner with over 10 years of experience, which includes a 2-year period working as a planning inspector. And I wish to take my time today to outline the main considerations why I feel that members should support the officer's recommendation to grant permission. But before doing so, I wish to remind members that you are here today to determine the application before you, not the other application for a side plot at 51A. That's a separate application.
Thank you. I think we're aware of that.
I just wanted, because that's a couple of points that were raised by the local residents. In terms of issue 1, character and appearance, the site is located within the settlement boundary of Sturminster Marshall, where the principle of new development is acceptable. As members have heard, within the immediate area, there are several examples of backland development, and this includes 5 dwellings to the rear of 20 to 22 Churchill Close, which were approved at appeal in 2021, with the inspector finding that such development would not be out of character. Numbers 50 to 51 Churchill Close benefit from long rear gardens with a depth of approximately 30 metres. The NPPF and neighbourhood plan advocate for the efficient use of land to provide new homes, whilst maintaining an area's prevailing character. In this case, the proposed dwellings would be single-storey and situated to the rear of the plot, where they would be well screened from views from Churchill Close by the two-storey frontage dwellings. Therefore, the proposal enables more efficient use of land without compromising the unique planned estate character. As such, the proposal would be compatible with its surroundings and compliant with policy HE2 of the local plan. Issue 2, neighbouring amenity. The proposed dwellings would be single-storey bungalows with hip roof forms. Therefore, the development would not cause harmful impacts such as a loss of privacy, outlook or daylight to occupants of neighbouring buildings. It's recognised that development will result in a small number of additional vehicle movements and domestic activities at the site, but this is an existing settlement where such activities are commonplace. In addition, suitable separation distances are provided. For these reasons, the proposal would preserve neighbouring amenity and comply with the development plan. Finally, highway safety. The proposal provides a policy compliant amount of parking for the new and existing dwellings. In addition, the layout includes on-site turning areas to ensure the vehicles at the rear can exit in a forward gear. And the application has been assessed by the Highway Authority of no objection to the proposals. So in conclusion, members, the application has been thoroughly assessed by your officer, and I agree with her conclusion that the proposal would have an acceptable impact upon the character and appearance of the area and cause no material harm to neighbouring amenity and highway safety. For these reasons, the proposal is compliant with the development plan. Therefore, I hope you agree with the officer's recommendation to grant permission and vote in favour of the proposal. Thank you for your time today.
Thank you. And our last public speaker on this is from Sturminster Marshall Parish Council, Councillor Hilary Palmer.
Thank you for letting me come here today. Chairman and councillors, I've come here today to speak against the planning application to demolish a garage, outbuilding and erect two-bedroom bungalows with parking in the garden behind number 50 Churchill Close. The Parish Council has concerns over this application regarding overdevelopment, parking, safety and flooding due to increased impermeable surfaces. Sturminster Marshall Neighbourhood Plan has recently been adopted, and this development is contrary to policy SNP9 and policy HE2 of the East Dorset Core Strategy, both of which require any development to respect the established character, scale and density of the local area. The proposed bungalows are positioned too close to neighbouring properties, potentially impacting the amenity of adjacent homes. This has been pointed out in P/PAP/2023/00028 by the case officer. Although we need bungalows, we feel that taking away the amenity value of this garden is detrimental to the openness of the environment within this area. There are properties which have been built in the gardens of houses in Churchill Close, and they are now only beginning to be sold after being empty for 3 years. This is due to people not wanting to live in such close proximity to other properties in a village situation. There is also a further planning application for a bungalow behind number 15 Churchill Close, and this is still outstanding, awaiting determination after a year. There are many issues with parking in the village. In Churchill Close, not all of the properties have off-road parking, and the green is a much-used space by junior and senior village football teams and other leisure activities. The proximity of the proposed access to the bungalows in relation to the entrance to Churchill Close from Newton Road raises safety concerns due to limited visibility and the potential for increased traffic on this residential road. Insufficient parking provisions on the plot will lead to vehicles parking on the road, exacerbating traffic and accessibility issues for other residents. The new parking facility for number 50 also reduces the number of parking spaces on the road in Churchill Close for visitors and deliveries because of the drop curb. There are concerns also regarding with the additional development on this site with increased the flooding risk in the area. Newton Road floods, and increasing the impermeable surfaces by building in this area will exacerbate this situation. Can I ask that you think very carefully about this application with regard to overdevelopment and the effects it will have on the adjacent properties, unsafe parking, access conditions, increased flood risk, and the impact to the green? Thank you.
Thank you. Ms Adams, do we have a response to any of that?
Thank you, Chair. In regard to concern about surfaces, I can confirm that the proposed surface water management plan shows that all the hard surfacing in front of the new buildings and the access would be permeable. And the intention with that is to obviously try to mitigate against the concerns raised by objectors. In terms of ecology, there was a bat survey done which confirmed no bats. There hasn't been a slow worm survey done, but I mean, this is garden land, so it's anticipated to be in regular use. If slow worms are on the site, they are protected species and they must be treated as such. That's separate legislation to the planning regime, although of course it's related, but we don't have evidence that is something that we would be able to refuse on. If slow worms were found, then they need to be mitigated. In terms of the difference between the pre-application advice, which was mentioned a couple of times there, and the current officer position, we have to analyse on the basis of the information that we have. Concerns were highlighted in terms of making sure that the proximity of the dwellings to the boundaries and the form of those dwellings were going to be acceptable. The applicant has taken that advice and has progressed the application as they've seen fit. We're now assessing that application against the policies and haven't identified a reason for refusal on the basis of harm to neighbouring amenity. There was question about the distance. I think you can see it on that slide. I've only highlighted there the distance from the first floor, and they talk about a large ground floor extension, which is, the ground floor is there, yes, which reduces the amount of garden space, but one would not anticipate harmful overlooking between ground floor windows when there's opportunity to erect fencing and other boundary enclosure between them. Car parking complies with the council's requirements. Anything else?
You see the green.
Yeah, so I think I probably said in my presentation that we fully appreciate that the green is a very well used and important recreational facility, but the additional cars and potentially associated visitor parking with these two properties is not considered to have a detrimental impact on that safety and enjoyment of the recreational area. Thank you.
Overdevelopment.
Oh, overdevelopment was mentioned. That is it can be a subjective determination, but I would say in this instance we're talking about a settlement. I appreciate that people enjoy the amenity of the village as it currently is, but we need to, as an authority, make efficient use of land, and unless there is demonstrable harm, then there's no reason to refuse. Officers consider that this accords with policy LN2, which requires efficient use of land to a level which is compatible with the character of the area and the advice of the NPPF. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Adams. Anyone have a question from the committee? Anyone want to say anything? Councillor Brenton.
Yeah, Councillor Brenton, Litchfield and Upton. I do apologise. I'm always the first to butt in. I know Stonington Marshall fairly well, and the issue of flooding is a hot topic. Last winter there were several times when you couldn't get over down to the Far Bridge. It is it's an interestingly scattered village. It's not as dense as you'd think for what classes as a village. Certainly Newton Road feels very different from Churchill Close as an area. I've been looking at the aerial photos and I wonder if, I can't remember, there was a picture on the presentation, let's find it, which shows that, no, that's the far end. The picture, the slide that showed the view at the back. Can't remember which one.
Sorry, down the garden.
That one. Can you just talk me through this one? The White House is Cwtch, Okay. And because on the aerial photographs, it shows quite large trees at the far end of the 51's garden. But on this, it doesn't seem to. Are the large trees the other side, further away? Okay. But there are some quite big mature hedges by the looks of it. Or are they not actually on the boundary hedge? I mean, on the aerial photograph, it just looks like a big block of green. And I was just wondering what screenage there is there already.
I think we have to assume, well, so there's fencing and a bit of hedging, but we've made the decision based on this recommendation based on there would be potentially some more landscaping put in at the back, but we wouldn't rely on that to make it acceptable.
Okay, thank you. Can I have one more? In the row of houses of which 50 and 51 are part of, there are no other back garden developments yet. As far as I could see, there's 2 other areas where there's a garage connecting 2 houses. So potentially there are 2 other places where this could happen. Is that right, my reading of the picture?
We can't speculate.
No, I know you can't, but you could
in
say
terms of the number of garages.
in the number of garages that join as links.
Yeah, I think there were 2 along. Well, there's the current one that we're talking about.
Yeah.
There's another one further to the west, and then it'll be easy to stick on here, isn't it?
Yeah.
One there, and then there's a single garage at the end there.
Okay, right. Okay, so there's not many other opportunities. That's what I was thinking in terms of on this stretch. Okay. And the other part is it's just a question. This is just a question. This is a backyard development behind 50 and 51, so it's a joint application between the 2 households.
No.
How does that work then?
So it's been made, and certificate B has been signed. So certificate B means that the applicant's not the owners.
But it does cover 2 different properties, back gardens. Yes. Because when I initially read it, I thought they must be turned the other way to fill in the long garden, but they've gone across. Okay, thank you very much. That's just a clarification.
Thank you. Anyone else? Councillor Gorringe?
Thank you. Councillor Barry Gorringe, St Leonard's and St Ives. It's interesting this because over the last 10 years in my area, my parish, we've had numerous backland developments similar to this, which 99% of them have been approved. Because we're constrained in St Leonard's that we've got Avon Heath, and Moors Valley and SSI land, the only way we can build is inward. So this is the reason why all these applications have been approved. And I would assume that this is very similar, that you've got farmland all the way around Sturminster Marshall that probably can't be built on because of Greenbelt, etc. So from my view, this is quite common. So I would be quite happy to propose approval. There is 2 issues that I have, that there would be a condition that, and that this happens in my area, where a similar application is approved for a 2-bedroom, and then the applicant comes back 6 months later before he starts building and decides to make it into a chalet and make it a 3-bedroom. So I would put a condition that because of the overlooking issues that we would put a condition on my approval if we go down that route that would be part of my recommendation. Thank you.
So can you just clarify exactly what that condition would be?
That there should be no further development in the roof of making it into a chalet. Therefore, there would be the possibility of overlooking at the back.
Okay, I think that might be covered by condition 10. on the,
Yeah, covered.
Is it covered? Is it something I've missed?
I think everybody must be looking because it's gone really slow. Condition 10, notwithstanding the provisions of the town country planning, lots of including windows shall be written. I think that covers it. I'd like to. There's a lot of sort of legal brackets and ifs and whereabouts in there, but it seems to do it.
No roof arrangements or roof alteration.
Any order revoking or reenacting no roof enlargement or roof alterations,
19.
including windows permitted by Class B and Class C. Although that doesn't necessarily prohibit it becoming a 3-bedroom, does it?
No roof enlargement.
13.12.
Well, yeah, but you
You
don't
need
have to-
windows to have a roof upstairs.
The means of escape.
By indirectly, apparently it does, because if you have another room, you're going to have another window. Seems fair. So does that cover the condition you would like to impose?
Yeah.
Yeah. So your proposal is to approve, yeah?
Two.
Okay.
You said
One
two
moment.
things. I think Councillor said two.
Was there a second issue?
The other thing was, Chairman, is this business about the slow worms that the gentleman's raised. He says that there's slow worms in his garden. Has any survey been done on this site to prove that there are any slow worms on this particular site?
Not that I'm
No, I
aware
think the
of,
answer
but
to that is
probably not, no.
So I dig ones.
But slow worms come into my garden as well.
so.
But they're
That's
separate.
Biodiversity, but
They are protected. I'm sorry, don't public speakers. Look. So it's clear. Councillor Gorringe, are you making a proposal?
I've made a proposal for a
Approve.
recommendation as per the agenda.
As per the officer's report. Do you have a seconder for that? Councillor Azard, are you seconding it? Would you like to make any comments or?
Yeah, subject to biodiversity, if they could be checked for reptiles. That could be in condition that they check for that first.
So you would want a
That's what
condition that,
Barry,
yeah.
you know,
So
councillor Gorringe.
if slow worms are present, then what?
They're usually removed.
Well, if slow worms were
What
found,
is it you wish to happen if they are there?
if slow worms are found, then we're in a different ball game, aren't we? Because they're protected.
Yes,
They are, but I don't know if that would be a reason for refusing.
Come up with a mitigation.
Yes.
Smooth snake.
If slow worms are present, then there needs to be a mitigation element introduced. I presume that could be introduced by condition. So that if slow worms are found to be present, suitable mitigation must be approved by the council.
Yeah.
Would that be acceptable?
That would be acceptable.
Chairman, there's
Councillor Azar.
already a condition there, permitted development rights removed. That's roof additions.
Yeah.
So that's already put on there.
Yeah.
On the
Yeah,
last,
condition 10,
on
yes.
page
Condition 10,
17.
Yeah, that's condition 10. So I think that answered Councillor
That
Gorringe's
covers it.
initial
Yeah.
query. We moved on to the slow worms, and we're looking at introducing a condition that if they are found to be present, then there must be mitigation taken in agreement with,
Conservation officers.
Mitigation plan to be approved.
mitigation plan to be approved by the council.
Yeah.
I think
That work for you?
That would cover it.
Yes, and I would, Chairman, Beryl Azard Wareham, I would second that. Thank you.
Okay,
as a granting.
so we have a proposal that's been seconded. Councillor Hobbs, Shell used to.
Thank you, Chair. Sorry, on the report, it mentions DC Net about the ecological impact assessment. They have not received one and have therefore not commented on that. And are recommending that an ECIA is produced in a fee. Can I just have some clarity on what we've done about that?
If I could just point you to 13.21 of the report, it explains that although the red line is under a hectare, the area affected is limited to, so the red line is over in 1 hectare, but the area affected by it, the red line includes number 51 that's not going to be built on. So it wasn't considered that an ECIA was required in this instance.
Okay, does that answer your question? Okay. Yeah, Councillor Trite.
Thank you, Chairman. One of the things that the parish council said was that they considered this to be overdevelopment. Our officer's response to that was that judgment on overdevelopment is a subjective matter, as indeed it is. The parish council also said that this proposal is out of character and out of scale. And I have to say that I think that out of character is absolutely right. How do our officers respond to that? The view that it is indeed out of character in this particular area?
So the character of the area that's identified by the Sturminster Marshall neighbourhood plan it relates to the 2-storey dwellings that circle and sort of provide this really pleasing framework for the open space, and that is something that has been identified as being characteristic of the area. So when we're looking at this proposal, the officer's viewpoint is: does this development detract from that characteristics of 2-storey terrace framework that's in the area? And we can't say that it does, because these plots are set back, they're single-storey, they are going to be glimpsed, yes, in a similar manner to the previous appeal win on the other side of the street. Yes, they are reducing the depth of these gardens, but they are achieving new dwellings in a manner which respects the character of the area, because they maintain that framing of the 1950s estate.
Okay. And does that satisfy you? Or?
It's an answer. It doesn't entirely satisfy me.
We're getting very cryptic.
Okay. Do we have any more questions or debate? Oh yes, we do. You wrote it on. Councillor Surreyhouse.
Thank you. Councillor Surreyhouse, Crawford Ward. I've got a very tiny thing that I want to ask you, and then something a bit more substantive, and then a clarification, please. Yeah, it is actually shown on the image on the screen here. I missed, you were moving at pace. I missed what you said about bin store in your presentation. Can you just repeat those words for me?
Apologies for the speed.
No.
So the bins will be stored in the gardens of the 2 properties. On bin collection day, there is an identified bin collection point here for the bins, so that they're not adding to clutter on the pavement.
Thank you. So, as a comment on that, that's not how it works in practice. Bin collection is curbside, and I know a number of properties that have corrals for bins like that, and if they are put there, they're not collected. So I just want that to be heard so that any agents, architects listening understand that. This will add to clutter on the pavement, because unless there is an identified disability when collections can be taken by entering a drive, then they will be left. And that is my experience of helping residents with non-collections. So my point of clarification is with regards to slow worms. As I understand it, they don't preclude any development. And actually, if they are identified there, the mitigation is that they're removed and put in a suitable environment for them. So that would be, in practice, what would actually happen. And the more substantive point is, whilst authorities are encouraged to adopt design codes, Dorset currently doesn't have a design code. As I understand it, the view of the authority is that local plans will inform design codes locally. And then if we arrive in a situation where we all have neighbourhood plans, they will form an overarching design code, which may vary with regards to environment of West Bay, Bridport, Ferndown, and so on and so forth. So I see in point 10 that the Stonminster Marshall Neighbourhood Plan, which is something I'm quite familiar with because it's quite a good quality document and was a significant investment by the local council there. But when it comes to material considerations, I don't see any mention of the plan or the weight that it's given. Now, this is an established plan, and clearly the parish council are here today representing their concerns. So could you just walk me through the consideration of the Stonminster Marshall Neighbourhood Plan and how that impacted on your recommendation?
I think that's probably with reference specifically to SMNP 9 is raised by the parish council.
Sorry, through you, Chair, I'm slightly concerned. So at point 13.5, we talk about SMNP 9, and we talk about the estate character, and then later on we talk about so at 13.6 we say that it's considered the proposal does respect the character of the estate as a private policy SMNP 9, and then we talk about policy 11, which talks about the heights and the fact that although this isn't two-storey, which is the prevailing character of the close, there are single-storey form in the locality, and this is as backland development. This would be, this would work. And then later on, we talk about SMNP 13 and the architectural design. Although these are backland plots, so they're not going to contribute to the street scene, but they have got a degree of architectural detailing that we would anticipate. And then we talk about 12 at 13.8, and that's about the loss of the boundary, the wall and the boundary treatment. So forgive me if I've missed something, but I had considered that we had taken into account the neighbourhood plan.
Yeah, I guess my point was in the papers that we have here, we've got material considerations emerging local plans. That's not an emerging local plan. Then we deal specifically with the Dorset Council local plan. I would have liked to have seen those considerations for the impact on the or consideration and weight given to the Stonminster Marshall Neighbourhood Plan kind of sectioned out.
Forgive me, but that's because that forms part of the development plan. It's under the development plan section. So it's on page 39. underneath, directly underneath the reference to the East Dorset.
Page 39.
Yeah. That's, yeah.
Adopted Stoneham Marshall neighbourhood plan.
Where are we?
So there's the Stoneham Marshall neighbourhood plan immediately under the Christchurch and East Dorset local plan.
But we don't have a link to the plan itself.
No, we don't. And also
They're online.
it doesn't say what weight is given to it, whereas it does on the others. So I'm just mindful that parishes are spending an awful lot of money, and there's a lot of central government and also council encouragement for people to develop these plans. And yet here, where there's clearly a concern, we have no indication as to what weight you give that. And I can't help but think there'll be some parishes that will look at decisions and reports and think, what's the point? Why did we spend all this money and all this time doing it? And it may be that it's just the way it's presented, and I don't doubt the veracity of the report. I'm just saying that if I was about to embark, as we are, on a very expensive neighbourhood plan, when you bring the community together, it's not simply councillors that are doing it, and then they look at this and don't appear to see their views reflected. I just think that's maybe something we could look at.
Yeah, just briefly, I would have thought that an adopted neighbourhood plan, a made neighbourhood plan, would have the same weight as any other document in the planning process. It's sort of local plans or NPPF or whatever. But please.
Through you, Chair, if I may. So on page 55, at paragraph 9, the council, the officers have set out the duties, which says that the determination of a planning application must be in accordance with the development plan, unless materials. 38 in this one, sorry, got the other report.
So only go to 49.
It's my fault. I picked up the next report. There were two bits of paper on the table, and I've picked up the wrong one. So you'll see under paragraph 9, page 38, that the duties, they're not under the bit where we list the development plans, but there is a section that talks specifically about the weight you give to the development plan, and then in 10 it lists what those development plans are, and under that you've got the adopted is the next paragraph, so you don't have to go looking for it. The relevant planning policies in the adopted Christchurch and East Dorset local plan and the adopted Stoneham Marshall neighbourhood plan, and those are under the heading development plans, and the preceding paragraph talks about the weight you give to those development plans. So I apologise for any confusion. So that it says the determination of planning applications must be in accordance with the development plan, unless material circumstances indicate otherwise. And then we go to list what those development plans are in paragraph 10. So hopefully, Councillor Surreyhouse, that does answer your question, because it is covered. Thank you.
And the made neighbourhood plan is part of
the
relevant planning policies.
And comes under the heading.
It comes under development, yeah.
Thank you for that. All I would say is, as a lay person reading this, and I'm looking at emerging local plans, and we see about weight being spoken about, greater the weight that may be given, and blah, blah, blah. And then we go to Dorset Council local plan, and we talk about very limited weight in decision making, blah, blah, blah. You know, these are terms. Harm, weight, these are terms that we are used to seeing, and I don't see that written in respect of the Stoneham Marshall neighbourhood plan. And I appreciate that we can jump from one page to another to extrapolate what we need to know. I think it should be clearly stated in one paragraph in respect of neighbourhood plans, and that may be an opinion, and we know as Councillor Flower would say, there are lots of opinions, and this is just one of them, and that's my opinion.
Thank you, councillor Surrey House. Yeah, I think the point's been made, but I'll leave you to. Just to, I think as far as the committee's aware, neighbourhood plans that are made, as this has been, have full weight in the planning process. Is that correct?
And the report
And indeed more weight.
Tries to make that clear.
And indeed more weight than a local plan, which is nowhere near ready. So it's probably one of the prime documents we have to guide development. Is that correct? Okay. Councillor Coombs and then Councillor Hobbs-Shell.
Councillor Tony Coombs, Burwood Ward. While we've been discussing all sorts of bits and pieces, I've been sitting here looking at that particular location plan, and I'm becoming more and more fixated on the distances between the northernmost proposed bungalow and Kitch. I think on one of the other viewpoints you said that the 6.5 metre back garden distance of the proposed, but what I don't understand is the relationship between the northernmost proposed bungalow and Kitch, because there is no building to building distance listed. And what if you could sort of expand on that for me, and then I'd like to come back.
While my colleague just double checked, my understanding is that Kitch is quite close to the boundary, as you can see on there. So the measurement on our plan is about 8 metres from the rear of that northern bungalow to the neighbour.
But indeed is very close. The reason why I asked the question is that the layout of that proposed bungalow puts all the living accommodation at the closest point to Kitch. I know it's not for us to change and plan on the hoof. However, I think if the relationship of that bungalow was handed so that it was the bedroom accommodation that was closest to Kitch, that would help ease some of the immediate household noise that has been mentioned. So in reference to paragraph 316, where we talk about perception of overlooking and saying that it is oblique, but the main impact is from one window. Can you talk me through that as well, please?
So, apologies. So this is the bedroom window. So I'm not very close to it. That is so on the back of Kitch, so it's in here. So it's facing this way, and then there obviously these are single story, so there will be windows facing towards the rear, and there's windows in the back of the property here.
That would also reinforce my argument about handing the layout. I am also concerned, you've also talked about the landscaping condition and the fact that the boundary treatment can be improved. Now, I know through very painful experience locally that a landscaping condition is actually as good as a chocolate fireguard, because a hedge can be ripped out or whatever, and I'm seeing the complete devastation when a 3 metre hedge along a complete boundary was removed, leaving the new development completely exposed to every movement, and it was a nightmare to get that sorted. It got sorted in the end, but I do worry about the reliance of landscaping conditions to prevent overlooking. I know we have a proposal to grant on the table. I'm not minded at this juncture to support that, and depending on the outcome of that, I might decide to come back.
Okay. Do you have anything to say, Liz? Or?
Only to say that the recommendation to grant is not based on an anticipation that any particular hedging or greenery at the back will be kept in this instance. We are anticipating though that there would be 1.8 2-metre high boundary fence that will be secured by the condition.
Okay, sorry, Councillor Azad.
I noticed in reading through the papers that number 51 has got an application in currently for a back garden dwelling, and number 51. As you've mentioned it, how will that fit with what's here at the moment? 51, not number 50.
Thank you. I'll let Liz answer, but I'm not sure that.
Sorry?
I'm not sure a potential application for something else is necessarily material to this application, but I'll let Liz answer.
Well, Chairman, it was mentioned.
Application. Yeah, I did mention it because I wanted you to be aware, but it is as yet undetermined. So this application is before you for determination. If this application is determined positively, then that will be taken into account in determining the application at number 51, but that is a separate consideration.
Can I just have a supplementary? Thank you, Chairman. Beryl, as we're on board. Because these two are taking up the back garden of 51, part of 51, if 51 has got an application in, that means there's going to be one put between their house and the ones right at the back where the garages were. So in that space behind their house.
I'm not sure this is
It's a
something
bit odd, but anyway, I'm just you know, flagging that up, and it does seem a bit odd. That's all. Thank you.
I think the officer includes it for completeness sake, but I don't think what might or might not come forward in the future is something we can worry about in terms of this application.
Right.
So each one stands on its merits, as I'm sure officers keep saying. We have had a proposal to approve subject to a mitigation of slow worms. And as we've heard, that mitigation would normally take effect by gathering them all up and depositing them gently in a place of safety. But given that, I think we're at a stage now where we can vote on that and then take it forward. Councillor Obshell.
Sorry, yes, just for completeness, thank you. I'm following my earlier. I can't see on this any sunlight and garden sunlight impact information, and it would clearly have an impact on the sunlight and therefore the design and the feel of things. I can't see it, and could you clarify whether that is something that we really do need to see actually?
So what exactly is it?
So potentially, given the small garden sizes and cutting the garden size of the original dwelling, you potentially, well, it looks to me very much like actually you don't have sufficient sunlight entering the garden to accommodate good design.
Okay. Officers.
Thank you. Due to the modest nature of the single-storey dwellings and their hipped roofs, it's not anticipated that the level of overshadowing of the gardens would be such that it would demonstrably harm future enjoyment of that area. So we haven't requested a sort of an overshadowing report in this instance. Usually where light is a particular concern, it would be the impact on neighbours, and again we've got sufficient separation distances to avoid that.
Yeah. Okay. So I think what we'll do is we'll move to the vote on the proposal, which was to approve, subject to mitigation for slow worms being an added condition. So can we have can we vote on this first?
All right, it's about conditions.
Well, okay, it's about that. Is it about that condition or?
Linked to that condition, Chair, could we please put a condition in that no mature shrubs, trees or hedges will be cut down during the nesting season? I know it is a legal ruling, but it has happened regularly in my ward, and I'm told, oh, that was just an informative. We can't enforce any. I just wondered whether that could be added.
I would hope that illegal felling of trees during bird nesting season, it's illegal when they haven't checked. That would. Don't think that's planning. That's the police or somebody. But yeah, I take the point. I don't think we need a condition to say don't break the law. I think that's understood. Hopefully. Can we take a vote on the proposal with the slow worm mitigation condition? All those in favour of approval, please show. 1, 2, 3, 4. All those against? 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So that proposal falls. So does anyone meant to make another proposal? Councillor Coombs.
I've got my neck on the block. I will move refusal. The reason being is the impact and the level of harm from overlooking, basically turning paragraph 13.6 on its head, as it was an on balance assessment by the planning officers. And my view is that it does not accord with the requirements of policy HE2 and therefore amounts to overdevelopment. It's cramped.
Okay.
Move refusal, Chairman.
Okay. Councillor Trite and then Councillor Sally.
I'm happy to second Councillor Coombs on that. I don't know whether she'll accept it or not, but I would still say that this is out of character. I'm pleased to hear her say that she thought overdevelopment too. But I would add out of character, but I don't want to detract from it. So if necessary, I won't go with that. But I would offer it.
I'm ambivalent, Chairman. If the committee wanted it, it's fine.
Okay, Councillor Sarah House.
Councillor Sarah House, Porthmadog Ward, I'm happy to accept that proposal. I would, if Councillor Coombs and Councillor Trite were content to add not simply overlooking, but actually outlook is a material planning consideration. And I think that Quitch would experience a significant loss of outlook, as was described by the representation made by the residents, and therefore a loss of amenity. And I have to say, I completely agree with the Sturminster Marshall Council that this does represent a significant change to that area and is out of character. But again, content if the members proposing don't wish to go with that, then that's fine. But I would just like the voice of the parish council in there.
Thank you, Councillor Sarah House. Councillor Coombs, are you content with these additions?
He added the word I admitted, which was amenity.
Okay, so we have a proposal to reject with reasons. Okay, we haven't taken the vote yet, so.
We need to put it on the screen for members to read.
Okay, so we're going to put a proposal up on the screen with the wording. Make sure that that's okay by proposer and seconder, and then we'll vote.
We have a 2-minute recess.
A 2-minute recess. To get those words out. We can have slightly longer recess because some people might need a little comfort. Okay, I think we're now ready.
Sorry.
Thank you to the officers. During the last few minutes, the officers have put together the words for the reason for the proposal to reject, which the proposer has approved. I'm very happy. So the question is, if we can read the words on the screen, those are the reasons for refusal.
Sorry. The longest sentence ever. I needed a breath halfway through.
I'm happy to delegate typos and grammar.
Thank you.
Yeah.
There's one comma.
There's one comma.
So, there is a pause for breath halfway through. Is so proposers look to that. Seconder, Will, you happy with those words?
Yeah.
Yeah. Any comments from anybody? So the proposal is that we refuse permission for the reasons on screen at the moment. We take a vote. All those in favour of that refusal, please show. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and against. 1, 2, 3. Stick to what you said, just 4. So that's carried 5 to 4, I make it. And he didn't make a vote. So, permission is refused. D4 2024 05059 50 Churchill Close, Sturminster Marshall is refused.
It's the way often goes like that. Get a 9-0. I do know the actual figures, although we don't.
We are.
They are recorded.
We are due. Excuse me. We are due to finish at 1 o'clock unless we take a vote to extend, which we could probably do now, because I doubt we'll finish in 20 minutes. But I would then couple that with, whilst officers change over and get ready to present the next item, a very short drink so that some people can get some refreshments, because there are some thirsty faces around it. It will take another 2 minutes just to get a bottle of water or
Where's the
whatever.
next one?
Have a break, yeah.
Okay, and then we'll continue until the end.
Sorry, how long is this break going to be?
About 5 minutes. So we're
Okay, I'll stay then, because otherwise I've got another meeting to go to.
We're going to take a break for about 5 minutes while people get some drink, but we're also going to vote on extending beyond 1 o'clock.
Okay, I propose to go over 1 o'clock.
So everybody happy to go over 1 o'clock if we need to?
Yes.
Yes. Why is my
Okay, right.
computer?
push on. We are now on
today.
agenda item 7. Is P HOU 2025-00586 15 High Street, Winfrith, Newburgh. Presented by Ms Adams, and we will not be having any public speakers on this. Or indeed public, by the look of it. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. So this application is before you for the erection of a single-storey rear extension. Objections have been raised by Winfrith, Newburgh and East Knighton Parish Council.
Well,
the application site is within the village of Winfrith, Newburgh, to the west of Wareham. It sits within the conservation area and is part of the Dorset National Landscape. The application site, shown here outlined in red, lies on the southern side of the High Street, which is the principal road running through the village. It's also known as April Cottage and forms part of a pair of Grade 2 listed thatched attached cottages. The dwelling fronts the road and is in a substantial sized plot. There are farm buildings beyond to the south, and there is a detached garage to the rear of the dwelling and a driveway and parking is that, as shown here. This is on the approach along the High Street, looking north. It's possible to see the existing detached garage and area of parking to the rear of the dwelling. Just looking the other way from the south, the High Street is a traditional residential street comprising dwellings which vary in their size and their architectural form. It includes a number of listed buildings and thatched cottages. The pattern of development is varied. Most of the dwellings are close or set against the highway with grass verge in the front and long rear gardens. This is a small single bedroom cottage with an existing extension to the rear that provides a downstairs bathroom built in the 1980s. Planning permission is sought to erect a rear single-storey extension on the back of the existing extension, and it's associated with a listed building application which has already received consent, which included internal alterations. The proposed extension is to provide a new kitchen dining area, thereby freeing up space for a larger living area within the original property. The proposed drawings also show the removal of one of the garage doors to be replaced by a new double glazed window. Given the positioning to the rear of the property, the extension will only be partially visible within the street scene. No objection has been raised by the Conservation Officer regarding impacts on the conservation area. The Parish Council have raised concerns that the extension would be a disproportionate addition to the property. It is on a generous sized plot, but the existing cottage is quite confined. On plan, when compared to the existing footprint, it is agreed that the current proposals are relatively substantial addition, but the actual living space being created within the extension is relatively modest, and officers consider it will create a more usable space for modern living, which is appropriate. The extension is low in height, so it will continue to appear as a subordinate addition to the main cottage, notwithstanding its depth. Subject to appropriate materials, it's considered to integrate with its surroundings in accordance with policy E12. Here you see the elevational drawings and the relative height. The scale of the extension is lower than the existing, to which it will be attached. Timber windows and conservation area roof lights are proposed on the southwest elevation here, and you see in the relationship with the garage. So the Grade 2 property, the listing refers to it as a pair of 18th century, early 19th century cottages with plastered walls, thatched roof and brick stacks. The Conservation Officer has not raised objection to the rear extension, noting that the existing cottage is confined and the proposed extensions will enable the building to provide modern accommodation, which has the benefits of which would outweigh the less than substantial harm that was identified from lots of historic fabric internally as part of the listed building application. Conditions attached to the listed building consent secure details relevant to protecting the character of listed building, including information about structural works, details of materials, joinery, window details, rainwater goods, extraction and ventilation. So they're all secured if planning permission is granted. And it's considered that the proposal is in accordance with the requirements of policy E2, which is our historic environment local plan policy in a perfect manner. Concerns were also raised by the parish council about impacts on the adjoining neighbour, who raised concerns about light loss and increase of damp. The proposed extension, as you can see here, is going to extend in close proximity to the boundary fence, but not immediately adjoining the neighbour. And there is this raised bed here, so that it explains the sunk position of the proposed extension, which will limit its height relative to the boundary fence. The modest eaves height is difficult to measure these because you've got sloping side, but it's going to be approximately 2 meters. It's 2.3 meters, but because it's sunk down, it's approximately 2 meters above ground level, and then goes up to a height of approximately 3 or 3.3, depending on where you're measuring from. We consider that the height has been sensitively stepped down from the existing Thatch 1980s extension, and the low eaves and partial pitches will achieve a scheme which minimises amenity impacts and avoids an overbearing impact. So the depth of the projection means that it does cut into, if you were doing a 45-degree check for light, it cuts into that, but due to the height, it's not considered that the impact, and obviously with existing boundary fence, the impact is not considered to be significant for neighbouring light, and so no demonstrable harm that would warrant refusal has been identified in that respect. We appreciate the neighbour has concerns, but there's already with thatch you do get water runoff, but the proposal is that guttering on the new proposed extension would divert water runoff to the courtyard and away from the northern boundary to the existing drain to the north. So overall, officers consider that the nature and the design of the proposed extension would avoid harm to neighbouring community. Concern was also raised about loss of parking spaces. Because this is a single bedroom dwelling, it's not considered that the resulting parking space, once you've lost a garage space and space that would be taken up by the extension, you'd still have at least 2, maybe 3 spaces. I think we said 4 on the committee report, but it's acceptable. It meets the regs. It meets the guidance provided by Highway team. So overall, the recommendation is to grant. There's no material considerations that we've identified that would divert from that recommendation that the permission should be granted. Thank you.
Thank you. We have no public speakers, so the floor is open to the committee. Councillor Brenton.
Thank you, Chair. Alex Brenton, Lidget Nupton Ward. Shall I be really controversial and say I'd propose accepting this as officer's recommendation in one fell swoop? I know. It's a 1-bedroomed house, and if you actually look at the planning application, the rooms are tiny. Therefore, the chances of you needing to have 6 parking spaces are pretty slim. So I think that issue is knocked on the head. Most of the other houses in this street have had some sort of extension at the back. And next door to this house in the pair is a larger property, and it already has add-ons. So I don't think the principle of this is a problem. The runoff from the thatch, I accept, having worked with thatch cottages, it can be an issue, but there is just about enough room if guttering's provided to divert that off. The living conditions of the one bedroom, if you actually look at the pictures of the staircase inside, you think this is a death stair. So therefore, I think enlarging the living room slightly would be good. There's quite a lot of thought about how to do that without ruining the style of the cottage. So personally, I'm all in favour of this one. I think it would be only fair to the poor person who has to go up and down those stairs. So I propose accepting.
Okay, I've got 1, 2, any other speakers on the list? No, we'll go with Duncan first.
Thanks. Duncan Surrey House, Corfmullen. So I've actually spoken with the ward member for here who actually also supports this application, although didn't comment on it at that point. But we had a really good chat about this, as well as other coastal applications that we have. I think the concerns that the parish council have with regards to disproportionate addition to the property, well, I think that ship sailed with the garage, to be honest.
And next door.
I think a double garage, which almost has the same footprint as the house, for a one-bedroom house, you know, that's already been decided. And I agree with Alex that actually it's very modest accommodation in there. And I think this is one of our COB constructed properties. And I think for someone to be investing the type of money that they're investing in this with just one bedroom, will secure this property for some time to come. So, yeah, I would be very content to go with the officer recommendation and approve this, whether it's by seconding your motion. I don't see any conditions or anything else that we need to tag on to it. Happy with the recommendation as it is.
Are you going to second the proposal?
I shan't.
Tony.
Or
I think Councillor
Tony.
Coombs already did.
Yeah, fine. Then I'll third it.
I didn't know Tony had spoken.
Duncan can second it, I'm quite happy.
No, I don't know. Outcome is what we're after, isn't it?
Yeah.
Scott wants to check
Yeah.
in.
Thank you, Scott Clark, Corfmullen. Just a clarification. I know we keep referring to this as a one bedroom, but it's town council has stated that the garage has actually been converted into a living space. So that, you know, though I don't disagree with development. There could be some concerns about car spaces because there could be more than actually just, yeah, a one bedroom. It technically, I guess, is a 2-bedroom. Just a clarification.
Can we confirm if that garage has actually been converted into living accommodation or not?
The chair, I haven't been to the site, so I can't personally confirm it, but my understanding is that they could do that without planning permission.
Okay, thank you. So I've got a proposal and we've got a second. Any more comments before we move to the vote, or shall we just move to the vote? Happy? We'll go to the vote. So all those in favour of approval, please raise 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, unanimous. Make it. Any problem with
The officers has to get one away.
places.
We've got those two, you can have one back.
No, we've got no urgent items and no exempt business. And therefore, at
No, I don't know.
1:13, meeting's closed. Thank you.
We didn't have to take that 5 minutes. Way.
places.
We've got those two, you can have one back.
No, we've got no urgent items and no exempt business. And therefore, at
No, I don't know.
1:13, meeting's closed. Thank you.
We didn't have to take that 5 minutes. Way.